Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, March 13th, 2014. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, we visit the remaining stop on our tour of Northwest Arkansas breweries, Apple Blossom Brewing Company. We'll get some background on their business and some behind-the-scenes info on their beers from brewer Nathan Traw. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. Our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on the Google Plus too. And thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of shopping on Amazon.com, go to our website first. Click on our Amazon ad. It will take you to Amazon.com where you can shop without paying any extra, but you'll be helping us to bring you the show, and we greatly, greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Home Brewers Association on our site, too. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes and our Android app on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. We're on the Windows Phone directory and lots of other places, I'm sure. Check out our brewer's logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front is a blank calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And there is room in the back to log the details of up to 50 batches of beer. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks to everybody who has done so already. And if you do that, I will send you a link to the bonus video that we produced, Steve and I produced at the end of last year. Protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. Check those out at basicbrewingshop.com. We had a lot of fun at Apple Blossom, so I want to get it right into it. Andy Sparks and I joined two of the brewery's owners, Evan McDonald and Sammy Stephenson, and their brewer, Nathan Traw. And they were kind enough to share beers, and Nathan shared tips on brewing some of the styles now on tap at Apple Blossom. I'm surrounded by brewing equipment and beers and gentlemen who are interested in beers. First off, let's go around and introduce ourselves.
I'm Evan McDonald, one of the co-owners.
I'm Sammy Stephenson, also one of the co-owners.
And I'm Nathan Traw, I'm the brewmaster.
And a familiar voice.
I'm Andy Sparks, and I'm really happy to be here today.
We're at Apple Blossom Brewing Company here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. This is the last in the series of the local breweries that I've been doing. And sorry it's taken so long to get to you guys. But you got something good going on here. The restaurant looks good. The bar looks good. The beers taste good. And let's go back a bit and talk about history. I mean, where did you guys? I mean, is this the second establishment that you guys have owned together? And there's more to the ownership than just you two, right?
It's quite a story.
Okay.
Yeah.
The story is the condensed story is as such. In 2005, I moved to Northwest Arkansas with the idea of opening up a cidery. Sammy Stephenson was nice enough to hire me at Tim's on the Square when he was still managing. About 6 months later, we became business partners. We incorporated. And then he left Tim's to go and work at Joe's Bistro under a gentleman named Joe Utch, who later became one of our partners. I'll get to that. He left Al Schaefer in charge at Tim's. After Joe's Bistro shuttered, Joe came on as a partner with Sammy and I, and it was Joe who had the idea to sort of wait out the recession behind something sort of recession-proof, which is a bar. So we opened up the Smoke and Barrel down on Dixon Street. It's a whiskey bar, music venue. We've been doing that for 5 years now. After about 2 years, Al Schaefer came over.
We hired him almost immediately, but then he got into ownership in our second year.
Right. From there, we had always been friends with Cheng Mong. In fact, Cheng Mong at the time was still a real estate agent and enabled us to get our location where we are at the Smoke and Barrel. And Daniel Smith, the final and sixth partner, had helped us with the renovation of the property. So we'd been working together for a long time. Finally, Ching and Daniel saw what we were going to try to do with Apple Blossom as something worthy of investment, and then they came on, and that really put the final pieces in the puzzle as far as being able to actually get this off the ground. So that's the condensed story of how we got here.
And how long has this been open?
Since July.
It's July 2013. Yep.
So it's interesting because every brewery in the area has a different story, and it seems like we've got kind of a microcosm of the brewing world here in Northwest Arkansas, from small to large. First of all, I guess, talking about the business dynamic, what's it like to work with such a large group of owners? Is it challenging, or is it are there strengths that brings to it, or what? How would you describe that dynamic?
I'd say beyond any challenges, it's such a boon. Besides having 6 sets of eyes on every problem, every person brings a different strength to the group. But the thing that I think has really set us apart is that we have a pretty unique way of communicating. We're able to get through problems quickly. We're able to not hold things precious, and there's not a lot of hurt feelings. We're able to get through the problems very effectively and deal with them. And I think that's particularly what sets us apart as an owners group.
That's definitely facilitated for almost 5 years
Absolutely.
now. We've had a meeting at least once a week for 2 to 3 hours where we all get together, and so nothing gets put back, nothing gets held over for weeks and weeks. You don't build up grudges. You just get it out there. We all hash it out together, and then we can move on. It's been great,
and it's become a thing now. Joe really made it very clear a couple of meetings ago at how what a battery recharging it is for us. Like that, once after a weekend, you get to come together at the top of the week and really get together with these other 5 men that you really believe in this with. So we get to recharge each other. We get to re-excite the whole idea once a week, which is invaluable.
So it's not always a smooth road, but when there are rough patches, you have open communications that you can work those things out?
Absolutely. We tried having the meeting up here for a little while at the brewery after we opened, and quickly realized that we couldn't be as frank and sometimes, angry with each other as we needed to be able to work through whatever issues we had. And so we moved it back to a house, to one of the owners' houses, and there we can all relax, completely be ourselves, and get stuff all good and hashed out every week. And it's been back to awesome ever since then.
Yep.
So Nathan is the brewer. So talk about your system. What have you got here?
So we have a 10-barrel specific mechanical system imported from Victoria, British Columbia in Canada. And they do have really awesome tech support. I just want to say, because we just got off the phone doing some slight modifications to our control panel. And currently we are a 2-vessel brewing system with a dedicated hot liquor tank. Eventually that we hope to expand that to a 3-vessel dedicated whirlpool, and then we can start getting to do some fun, like traditional mashes, decoction, or things like that, cereal mash too. We do have a insulated steam-fired jacket on the mash tun, so we can do some kind of cooking-like mashes, which is really fun. I love it. For a diverter panel general setup, and a diverter panel is basically there is one spot where all the connections for the brewery can be made, for the brew house, versus pipe or soft hose connections, which we're surrounded by soft hose everywhere. So for a diverter panel assembly, it's very well designed because you are locked into your U's, which are these guys. So are these U's which attach to different ports and allow us to send water or whatever it is to different areas. So it's really largely dependent on how that's designed, but this one's designed very well. So if any aspiring brewers out there are listening and shopping for a brew house, specific mechanical is by far the best diverter panel setup I've ever used. It's definitely by far one of the better brewing systems, period, that I've had experience with.
And you set me up with a beer. Yeah. This is the Fayette Weiss.
It's our Fayette Weiss. It's probably our flagship beer. It is modeled. Originally, these guys wanted to do Berliner Weiss right out of the gate, And I think I was one of the only brewers who didn't laugh at them about doing a sour beer, like full production-wise. And so I was like, okay, well, let's just try like what a general, grist recipe for Berliner Weiss might be. We tried that out. It's not sour, of course, but it became the Fayette Weiss. And actually, it was the first beer brewed here. And we actually got our first keg collar from the very first keg we kicked. Refilled dirty, mind you. And then 6 months later, we got it on a pony tap in the walk-in. It's still, as clean and crisp as it was 6.5, 7 months ago. So we're pretty pumped about that. But yeah, I can see it hanging up there. So, but yeah, it's about 60% red wheat, and then about 38% Pilsen, and then the remaining 1.5–2% of just flaked oats. And the oats are sourced, I think, from the same place where Quaker Oats sources their oats, because I've seen the same bag used in like the Modern Marvels and stuff like that. So. Yeah, that's our Fayette Weiss. It originally was selling 3-to-1 over everything else, and then our Armstrong American Pale Ale is actually on par, running at the same pace as it now. So,
I think it's got a nice multi-character. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, I kind of wouldn't mind if it was a little sour. I mean, I love a Berliner Weiss, nice tart, crisp summer beer. No, but it's nice and tasty. Yeah.
We are hoping to be able to. We're going to be procuring some tanks, some more brewing, some more cellar vessels in the next 6 months, and we're hoping to be able to get at least 1 or 2 tanks that we can devote to souring. In which case, we'll actually be able to start making genuine sour beers instead of just the grain bill for a sour beer turned into a wheat beer.
Right. I think the Weiss really leapt ahead early because it's a gateway beer. We have right here on the bike trail. We're right here by the lake. We get a lot of active people coming through, and they just want something. Well, you have a lot of Miller Lite drinkers coming through, and we don't have anything like that for them. So we want to have something that's a way for them to ease into craft beer. I think we've definitely seen that with the rise of the APA coming up to the same levels that we're selling to the Fayette Weiss. I think APA is the next logical step for the craft beer drinker. I think it's an easy gateway from that Fayette Weiss.
And I mean, you guys are coming in, kind of later than some of the other local breweries. Do you think that kind of gave you an advantage in that you didn't have to kind of break new ground for craft beer here in the area? You can kind of, you already have an audience that's been kind of groomed for this kind of thing.
It definitely that tide seems like it was already rising in the 10 months to a year before we got open. But I wish we could have gotten open 7 years ago. Whenever we first started working on this, I think we would have been doing great the whole time. I think Arkansas and Northwest Arkansas in particular has a large group of people that love good beer and love local stuff, and I think there's always been a market for that here.
So did you have in the back of your mind of opening a brewery at the very beginning?
Well, the cidery quickly changed to that, mainly with my beginning to really appreciate and love craft beer as I was living up here. So I think, we had to set I'd had the name Apple Blossom since 2004. And that's been the longest running thing. But we had to set that aside during the recession because none of the banks really. A bunch of bearded long hairs came in, and they didn't start cutting checks. It was the strangest thing. So it took a while for us to start, developing the clout and the notice that we needed.
Well, and it's good, because if we had been able to do it when we wanted to, probably half the company would have been owned by an outside investor. And by opening up the Smoke and Barrel and doing well with that in the meantime, and bringing on another couple of owner-operators, we've been able to do it with only people that live and breathe this business with us, and not have an outside investor that's not involved or particularly interested in anything but the bottom line.
Nice. So where do we go next, Nathan?
So next, Andy's already got a full pint of it, but it's our Armstrong American Pale Ale.
It's not full anymore.
Yeah. It's been about 5 minutes I poured these. I originally had this idea for a pale ale that had the nose of an IPA, but kind of drank more like an English pale ale. So it wasn't quite as bitter, but had nice toasty malt elements, and it had a little bit higher alcohol that you could but still drink more sessionably. So you can drink it more like your 5% beer, but it's actually 6.8. So it goes down real smooth. And of course, Northwest American hops, Cascade is used quite a bit. So is non-Northwest hop, German Northern Brewer. It's used primarily for bitterness, but the real hop that shines, the hop blend, is Falconer's Flight 7Cs, which I use in a first wort edition, a 5-minute edition, and then I dry hop 1 pound per barrel after fermentation. So that's where you get the nice hoppy nose from. Cascade's used and a little bit of dashes in the 5-minute in the dry hop. So more like a pound for the dry hop in Cascade, and then probably like a third of a pound for the 5-minute edition during the boil.
So what do you think first wort hopping gives you rather than more traditional
I
hopping?
picked it up originally in Montana. A local brewer, the brewing community where I was really cool. Brewers would just stop by all the time and offer advice, sometimes help you mash in. But they came by and was like, you should try first wort hopping. And it was during a time when Cascade, we're still experiencing it with Centennial, but Cascade was not really to be found anywhere. And I had just bought a 44-pound box of Galaxy right when it was taking off. And this was back in 2012. So it's back when Galaxy was first hitting the U.S. market and getting really popular. But he's like, you should do first wort, do 30% of your aroma addition as the kettle fills, and you can cut back on your aroma additions later. Well, what I discovered was that, yes, I could have, but why? And so I just like more hop aroma. So that's what I like about first wort hopping. I love the history behind it. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was developed in continental Europe as a method for extracting a certain level of bitterness from hops. And the bitterness is different. It's not like a traditional as harsh bitterness as what I've experienced. Sometimes when I was experimenting with it, I skipped a bitterness addition and just did first wort and then did aroma additions. And I discovered the bitterness, while it was pleasing and different, wasn't what we were accustomed to as drinking as far as like a normal 60-minute or 50 or 40-minute addition. So I do both now. So if I do a first wort, I always do a bitterness addition to get that classic bitterness taste and kind of let it have some complexity a little bit. And definitely for the aroma, it's primarily what I first wort for.
So you've done side-by-side sort of the same recipe?
Not really the same recipe. Kind of more the same style, though. Made an IPA with first wort and bitterness, and then made an IPA where I just did a first wort and then did a ton of post-30-minute additions, basically. And I kind of like that. So
it's a tasty beer.
Yeah, it is. I like it.
So it's not the bitterness is sort of more subtle. You still get hop character, but it's kind of a little more round. Would you say?
In this beer, I would say I agree with your description there. I mean, I've messed with first wort hopping too, and I'm still kind of my jury's out on it. I really struggle to find a difference with it, but that's at the home brewing scale. And again, I'm not doing a parallel experiment exactly this recipe against this recipe and then blinding. We've done experiments on Basic Brewing before where we do the blind taste to really try to determine whether we're talking ourselves into something or really tasting something, and I think that would be a fun experiment to do.
Mm-hmm. And from my previous production experience, breweries have said that they've tried it and they actually did not like the difference because their customers came back and be like, well, your IPA does not come across as bitter, but when we send it to a lab, it would still test the same amount of IBUs. It's just that perception was just lower because, and I don't know the exact chemistry behind it, I wish I did, but it's just not, I don't know if the bitterness acids are, dimerizing or, copying to each other and forming that nice bitterness that we all have grown to appreciate over the last thousands of years or so. But it's different. And so, but I do notice it in the aroma more than anything else, and that's really why I just I'll just put that on top. Because 30% of your total, aroma addition, when you look at it, it's not that much. So if you've already got the box or the bag open anyway, might as well. It's kind of my logic behind it too.
What's the yeast that you use with this?
We have 3 yeast strains here. It's actually a Scottish yeast strain for most of our continental Europe, and especially English Isle beers. And most of our American-based beer styles are made on the Scottish yeast. I'm actually thinking about doing a steam beer with that yeast because it can ferment as low as 50, and as high as 65. And the lower in temperature you go, the more smoky phenols you get. The higher you go, the more classic English character of yeast that you get. But 65 is the highest, and as you guys know, that's actually kind of mid-low. So the next yeast strain we have is a German ale strain, which of course is a beast, can ferment anything almost as dry as our last yeast, the Belgian, but can ferment as high as 75, but as low as 60. So it's a really versatile strain. And then our Belgian strain, which is the Ardenne strain, which is kind of a mix between Abbey and Trappist style of yeast, mixed with some, I think, like Belgian Vit characteristics. It's a really unique yeast. Ferments really dry, but then has a lot of character. Even for a Belgian yeast, it has a lot of character. So that's our 3 yeasts. And yeah, most of our offerings are on the Scottish yeast. The only offering we have right now on the German is the Fayette Weiss, and then of course we have our Belgian lineups that recent additions, so they're just kind of slowly trickling out.
So you're shying away from the California ale yeast?
Yeah, where I was brewing at Red Lodge used the German exclusively for their IPAs, all the way down to their Scottish even, which brewed exclusively using that yeast in the Fayette Weiss, and they had it worked out where they knew the fermentation profile for every style of beer they wanted to make with that yeast. And so I remember we would be bumping fermentations up and down depending on what style it was every other day. So I've just come to find out that like the strain is very important to the style you're making, but if you can manipulate your yeast in a certain way to get your own spin on a style plus some keystone flavors, I think is really important as a brewer, and I think that's what helps differentiate between your shift brewer and your brew master, is somebody who's also can take all that in the light. But I'm really happy to have 3 strains now. I'm actually waiting for the 4th, a lager strain. I'm kind of crossing my fingers for that in the future. So
more tanks.
Yes, more tanks. A little crazy with 4.
So how much input do you, as owners, have in the beers that Nathan brews, and how much do you just let him go?
I try to make room in the budget for him to do whatever he wants.
Right. It's mainly what the owners do is names and descriptions, and that's it. We hired, and that actually is something we haven't covered yet. We hired Nathan beer untasted. We hired him from a single FaceTime phone call. And
we'd already flown 2 different people up here who both brought their beer and interviewed them and liked them both, but it worked out well. It's obvious it was a good match.
Right. I mean, it's
a single conversation.
Yeah, it's serious evidence to just the gut feeling, just just to instinct. He seemed like our kind of guy, and then once we got here and we just let him take off, and he hasn't made a bad beer yet.
I will say the one beer that they pretty much had to twist my arm to continue making was the Fayette Weiss, because I was all about dropping that guy the first 3 months, and now I've just kind of rolled over. But I mean, and they are. I mean, it is logical. We do sell a lot of it. And a lot of people, we get a lot of great feedback on it, and so it's like keep making it. It's a great gateway craft beer, and I think sometimes they look at me like I'm crazy because this coming week we're brewing a chamomile lavender beer on our Belgian yeast, and they're kind of looking at me like, originally when I said that, like I'm crazy. Now they're excited about it, and I'm trying to think. When I did our chocolate pumpkin porter, when I was like, yeah, let's basically burn some pumpkin pie filling, and then we'll put it in the mash. And we did that, and it was like the starches in the pumpkin are going to interact with the mash enzymes and create more sugar, and that happened. And so we ended up with this really complicated beer that was just an awesome seasonal. And so I think now they're just used to it.
Complete faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I still don't know about putting a ham bone in a beer.
Yeah,
or the oyster beer. I'm not sure about that.
I mean, we'll follow you anywhere, honestly. But
now, a keg at a time, maybe not a batch.
Yeah.
Well, that's also why we started a cask program. It's kind of been absent the last few months because we've been busy, but we're starting it back to kind of do more of the crazy things in a cask. And then we're starting to do a lot more infused kegs. So fruit-based beers, we'll do just a couple kegs at a time because those don't need to sit too long. But we've got our Mockingbird, which we'll taste in a second. We've got vanilla, bourbon, aged vanilla beans with bourbon aged oak in a cask, and we're going to release that in about 2 weeks. And that's our black IPA.
What was the one you made over the winter that was the APA? Didn't have candy canes in it?
I thought about doing that. I can't remember. I did one really crazy one, and it escapes me.
Well, the pineapple one with the APA.
Yes, I did pineapple APA. Yeah, and of course the yeast by the week the cask condition managed to get to the sugars on that and digested it.
The rosemary black peppercorn
Rosemary
Tripel was really good.
Yeah, and so like we've experimented with lots of different things, so they're getting used to it. They're getting used to it. I haven't sold them on the oyster stout yet. But
Oh, you have.
Well, there is precedent for an oyster stout. I'm not sure about a ham bone beer though.
I had one at I heard of one. I didn't have it, but a friend of mine's a GABF judge. And he judged the experimental category one year at GABF, and he's like, dude, I had this ham bone porter that actually was very good. And I asked him how they make it, and he just said, yeah, like the night before somebody put like, a ham butt in a, basically I cooked like a pot roast in a crock pot, and then just took the bones to give it to their dog, just put it in a beer for a week. And it was like, hey, I'm going to do this at my production brewery. And so
It seems so uniquely Fayettevillean, like we're it's a hog fan beer right there.
This is hog country.
It is. Yeah. It isn't
Animal parts. One animal was harmed in the production of this beer.
Exactly. But it was fed the grain, so
That's right. It's the circle of life.
Exactly. It's recycling. It's biological recycling.
What's next, Nathan?
Oh man.
So, I've actually got to smell these guys. So yeah, this is our Mockingbird Black IPA. And when I was originally thinking about this beer is the very first cascading dark ale I ever had was from, I believe, Sierra Nevada. And I was in Springfield at the time, and I went to this awesome pub downtown Springfield. It has about 30-something taps, and they only had one keg of it. And I was trying to, like, this is awesome. This is what I appreciate from a porter, a light porter, so it's not heavy on roasted flavors, but this is what I appreciate from that as far as drinkability goes. But it's got the hop nose that I expect from something even being remotely called a black IPA. And so that's kind of what I set out to do. And when I was in Montana is when I started to notice the fad kind of picked up from smaller craft breweries, and a local brew pub had made their version. And then as far as just a little short story, they kept annoying me because they're like, look how black our black IPA is. And I'm like, yeah. But they basically taught me that there's really only one malt you can use for the color edition of the black IPA, and that's your Carafa Specials, which are...
How black can you get? None more black.
Yes.
More black. I got it.
Thank you.
Very good.
You passed the test,
Very
Evan.
So I used the...
It's a Spinal Tap reference.
It's been so many years since I've seen Spinal Tap. Oh, I need to watch it again. But
More black. You can't dust for vomit. You can't.
Let's not start down that trail.
We can't. There's a whole other podcast just for that.
That's right.
All right. Yeah, that's out.
So Nathan was talking about beer.
Oh. So the black carafe malt, basically, and one supplier is Vireman. It's the one we source it from, but it's dehusked, essentially chocolate malt. I would say it's probably closer to color and roasted barley, but I say dehusked chocolate malt because roasted barley, of course, is unmalted. And so it is malted barley that has the husk removed and then burnt to a powder, basically. But it does provide the color without the roasted astringency that you get from roasted barley and chocolate malt from that husk. And so they taught me that is the only malt you can use for color addition. And they're like, everything else is just an IPA with less crystal, is how it also was described to me. And so for mine, I use pale malt base with basically a full bag, or I think it equals out to be about 6% of the dehusked chocolate malt, or the Carafe Special 3, and then a tiny amount of crystal, which is these guys, they laughed at me, and I told them I hated crystallized barley, and they're like, what do you use instead of crystallized barley? Well, I use Golden Naked Oats, which is crystallized oats that's produced by Simpson, which is used in the Armstrong American Pale Ale, and it's pretty much what I use for primarily my crystal editions for a while. And now I have crystallized barley, and there actually is crystallized barley in the Mockingbird, and it splits. It's 50% shared with the crystallized oats, so I'm still staying true. But I mean, you can only get around crystallized barley for so long before you're. And I picked that up. There was an award-winning brewer named Mike who I met in Billings who really ingrained it into me that crystallized barley was bad, and he never had a reason. He just was like, it's a cop-out, everybody does it. He's like, so if you're going to brew an IPA, instead of doing like crystallized barley and then pale ale, he's like, there's something new in there. You use crystallized rye instead of crystallized barley, kind of changed it up a bit. And he went on to brew at Pelican. I don't know what he's doing now, so I mean, he knew his stuff. But I was like, okay, I like that. I can get around not using crystallized barley. And he did have a point. Every brewery I've worked in, like almost every recipe had crystallized barley in it, and it's just like everybody's, kind of feel like the time that everybody's brewing the same thing, which is a different yeast or different hop, and I'm like, let's just change it up a bit. And so that was my original thinking.
We're all about changing things up, right?
Sure.
What do you think, Andy? This is a tasty beer.
It is, Black IPAs is a beer that I really like a lot. I find that typically they have way more roasty character, they end up tasting like a big American stout or big American porter. And I like it to be really black, but if you close your eyes and drink it, you might just be drinking just a big IPA you should be able to discern a slight roastiness, I guess. But I'd prefer it to be dank, with hops, like it came straight from the Pacific Northwest, and then just black in color, right? So that it's, because otherwise it's a porter or a stout, right? So.
Well, this is good. I mean, it does have a bit of roastiness,
but it's very subtle.
Yeah, and it's not you don't get the astringency that you might if it hadn't been dehusked.
I think to Nathan's point about the crystal malts, a lot of breweries use domestic 2-row malt, and I think they supplement some crystal malt in there. Whereas if you used like pale ale malt, like a good British pale ale malt, it's roasted, it's kilned a little higher, and you're going to end up with that more pale ale color in your beer, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're using just a bunch of real pale ale malt, you can make your beer that color and flavorful and malty without leaning on the crystal malt. But if you're using something very pale, it's very difficult to get that color in it without throwing some crystal malt at it.
Mm-hmm. Now you has Nathan over challenged the patrons yet? Has he come up with a beer that's too that the bar is too high?
I can think of one, and that's the Gratz beer I brewed last summer.
But that was a miscommunication with Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue that even led us to have that measurement sitting around.
Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue approached us about doing a beer, and I was like, well, Gratz beers are starting to come back around from the beer market. This was last summer.
Now, what's a Gratz beer?
Gratz beer is a beer from South Poland, northern Germany that was forgotten about, and basically until the Nazis invaded Poland, and then they found one or two breweries that were still brewing it. And then it kind of had a little fad for I think 10 to 15 years, and then I think the last brewery in continental Europe stopped making it, I think in 1995. And about last year, craft brewers started picking it up. I believe it hit the cover of a magazine, and last year it was named as the fad beer style to brew in 2013. And so it's 100% smoked wheat, and that's it. And it classically has a slight sour flavor, not necessarily from a sour fermentation. It's kind of like the Gueuze, if I'm pronouncing it right, the salt beer, essentially. It relies on the chloride ions from the salt to give a slight sour flavor. And I think some versions had real sour producing, fermentables or fermentation organisms, and then some just had high chloride amounts. But it does have a slight sour taste, and that's it. It's really light, refreshing, oaky flavored beer. And the difference between oak and some of your other smoked malts is oak provides a lot subtle flavor that as Americans we're used to smelling when we go to a barbecue joint. One that has or if you have a barbecue pit at your home, professional grade level barbecue versus beechwood smoked, which has a heavy kind of like bacon grease, almost smokiness to it.
Or like an alderwood.
Exactly, yeah. And so it's a lot lighter in flavor, so you're thinking 100% smoked, wheat. That's going to taste nothing like my barbecue grill. It's going to take everything like my barbecue grill. And it was actually quite the opposite. And it started picking up with production brewers last year because Environment actually started producing it for commercial availability last year. And so that's why it kind of picked up. I kind of want to do one again this year. In fact, I placed a malt order last week, and I was like, I'm gonna do the Gratz beer. I'm gonna get 100% smoked wheat, and they're like,
Let's see if we can actually work it out with Bikes Blues this year.
Right.
We did a full batch with under the impression that half of it was going to go to Bikes Blues and Barbecue and go down to downtown Fayetteville and be sold out. So we ended up sitting on it a little longer than we had hoped, because it's a beer that you'll maybe have 2 or 3 of, but you're not gonna have 6. You're not gonna sit down in session. And a lot of people were surprised by the flavor of it, even though it was very good and well balanced and all that. So yeah, maybe.
Mixed remarkably well with a nice pulled pork sandwich. It was a perfect accompaniment to it.
So how would you? Was it like a face full of smoke, or how would you characterize
Not particularly.
It had a slight smoky aroma, but I wouldn't put it past. For example, the Scottish yeast produces a nice smoky aroma if you can let it ferment at the right temperature. And it was a little bit heavier than that, so really subtle aroma. But then when you tasted it, it probably was the hop flavor really came through on the beer as well. And I'd say you didn't really taste much malt character. That's probably its biggest drawback from my point of view, is that the malt character, because it was, smoked wheat, we got the smoke. So Environment did a good job with that. It was subtle, wasn't overpowering, but between that and the hops and then the yeast, it was brewed on our German yeast, the malt characters kind of got subdued, which might have been by design, but I settled on ordering a couple of bags of just Beechwood smoked barley, and we're going to do a smoked porter, I think, in 2 weeks. So I settled for that. For now.
I think a part of what surprised people too was getting that kind of thicker, more savory kind of flavor out of a beer that light in color.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think it was necessarily that they didn't like the flavor. It was just not what they expected as much.
Yeah, Andy, I've smelled and tasted smoked malt at your store, and I guess it depends on the variety, but opening that bag, it was like smelling bacon. It was very intense.
Right, and then the smoked malt I think you're describing now is the stuff from Breese, and it's a cherrywood smoked malt, and it is very intense, and has a very barbecue-y kind of aroma. And they say you can use it to 100%. I can't imagine a beer with 100% of that stuff in it. I've brewed it to 10%, 15%, and it's a nice smoky punch to the beer. I'm a fan of smoked beers when the smoke character is kind of subtle, like you are catching a campfire on the wind or something in the woods, and you kind of smell it a minute, and you're thinking, wait, I think I smell a campfire, and you take another deep breath. And you're trying to catch that beautiful aroma again. And I like that when it's in a beer and you're take another big sip and you're trying to, oh, yeah, there it is. It's just subtle. It's right there, and then it fades off. And you have to get another gulp to get that back. So, yeah, I really like some smoked beers. Now, I've had some that taste like you're, putting your face in an ashtray, too. So
Drinking liquid smoke.
Right.
Yeah. Nathan is picking up some more beers here. I noticed that Nathan got a glint in his eye when you said cherry smoked.
I actually haven't heard of that malt, so I'm.
You can come down and get some anytime you want.
Is this for me?
Yeah, this is our, as I'm calling it, a Selkie 90. We did a Selkie 80 about 3 months ago, and it never really took off. I brewed it because it was a good intermediate beer, I thought, and actually the Beaver Lake, which is where the brewery's water is sourced from, actually is very low in iron, which is really great for Scotch. And so I was like, I'm just going to do a Scottish ale that somebody might brew in preparation for distilling. So basically a distilling mash. And that's originally but it never really took off until we were down to about 30% of our inventory, and then everybody wanted it, of course. And so we had a lot of demand for it to come back. And so about a month ago, I brewed it again. It's kind of an intermediate offering. And yeah, it's basic Scottish. The crystallized barley's in there. with some red wheat and our pale ale base. And then, of course, on the Scottish yeast, I believe I fermented it about 61. So it does provide a nice smoke flavor. Our water's not exactly what you can get it in Scotland, of course, but it's pretty close as far as just the chemical concentrations go. It's not as hard, I don't think, but it's there. It's probably like one of the more basic beers I've brewed here.
Does really well on nitrogen too.
Yes, we
I
had
can
a
imagine.
nitrogen version for a while. My method of creating nitrogen kegs, you partially carbonate, then we keg off all the kegs we want for nitrogen, and then we actually charge it with pure nitrogen on our nitrogen generator, which is basically pulling nitrogen from the atmosphere and storing it in a tank. We could use it as an emergency CO2 source if we wanted to, because it's originally designed to be what pushes your beer from the keg to the tap. And instead of, it's less molecular oxygen in contact with your beer, which is a great thing usually, but then your beer might go flat. And so that's why we just use it to create pure nitrogen to charge our nitrogen kegs. So it's kind of like the Guinness effect. When you tap it, that pure nitrogen's already there, so you're basically replacing that pure nitrogen with pure nitrogen from your tap. The carbonation stays the same for the most part. It creates a nice even pour with that creamy nitrogen effect. And so at the time I only made one keg, because I've discovered nitrogen beers here in Northwest Arkansas aren't quite as popular compared to where I was brewing. Like, for example, in Montana, I think we would go through like 4 to 5. We had 4 to 5 nitro kegs and a nitro stout faucets in a tasting room in a brewery. So they, sold quite a bit in the north. But that's understandable. So, so I made one keg and then it's gone. So yeah.
Well, this beer is all about the malt. I think
Yeah.
It's very nice.
Yeah, I was wondering, you said it was similar to, I guess, what you'd use in distillation, but they don't typically put hops in that. How is the hopping ratio in this? It's obviously very low because it's not very bitter.
Yeah, I believe I accidentally got a 44-pound box of German Hersbrucker, and that is the hop I used in that beer in conjunction with East Kent Golding. So when I started, I have a friend at a particular hop company who was saving 44-pound boxes underneath the table, and he owns the company, so he can do whatever he wants. But he shoved. That's how we got a Cascade hop contract and a Centennial hop contract when everyone else is just, especially for Centennial, struggling to find it. And we got Falconer's Flight, and so he, basically put some East Kent Golding aside for us, but I didn't want to basically blow it because I really want to do some great stouts and porters. The next brew coming up uses a lot of East Kent Golding with some Northwest hops. But yeah, East Kent Golding, accidental Hersbrucker that I got. And that's very little. It's been a while since I've looked at the brew sheet for it, but I know the Fayette Weiss has a little bit under a pound of total hops used. For our size, it's quite low. And I think the Selkie was the next lowest hop amount. I think just a little over a pound. And of course, most of that was a 60-minute, and then I think I did a 20-minute edition. So
I could see where that would be a good gateway beer as well, because it's not in-your-face bitterness, but it's interesting. It's a tasty beer. Yeah. This question comes from the fact that I can smell smells from the kitchen. Have you guys done much with pairing beers with dishes, or using beer in the dishes, or kind of crossing the border between these two spaces?
Absolutely, yeah. The kitchen's made batches of cookies with spent grain for sure that were delicious. They're recommended beer pairings generally with any of our desserts and with a lot of our entrees. What else?
Very recently we have
beer cheese soup.
Right,
all
beer
the
cheese
time.
soup all the time. Clearly,
we use beer in our tempura battering for
Right.
for most of our fried food.
That beer cheese is on the cheese fries, a very popular appetizer.
Yeah, the Alfredo cheese.
And then we have a very talented kitchen. Joe has been able to pick and guide some really talented young gentlemen, and they've been able to incorporate. I think, what would that have been? Yesterday or Thursday? What's today?
Thursday.
There it is. Just all blurs together when you're having a good time. But on Thursday, they put together a veggie curry, and they were able to work our soulless ginger ale into it, and so you got these these interesting ginger notes that clearly go well with it. You know, it's interesting to see what we're able to pair these things with, things that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
I mean, as a bartender, when you're opening, I've got a kitchen guy coming up front about every 15 or 20 minutes, getting a pitcher or a pint of this or that that goes into a lot of our meats. We'll get prepared either before they're cooked or as they're cooked in our darker beers, and then the APA and a lot of the Fayette Weiss and a lot of the other beers are used in the tempura battering and some of the lighter flavored foods for sure. And then, as a testament to the kitchen too, we've been open less than a year, and we got invited to the Art of Wine, one of 12 restaurants. They do an amazing job, and the beer absolutely complements that quite a bit.
Well, and our executive pastry chef, Cody Johnson, has been working. He has a 13-year-old sourdough strain. A lot of that's worked into all the beer. We make, of course, all of our own breads on site, and so a lot of that's been working into it. But he's also got a relationship with Post Family, so he's able to get some muscadine from them and then harvest the natural yeast from the muscadine to start working that into the sourdoughs as well. So the idea, of course, the next step is to start working that 13-year-old sourdough into the beer.
I have done a couple of 5-gallon bucket open fermentations with it, which I think we would have to quote unquote breed it, not in the sense that we would have to do a couple of 5-gallon bucket fermentations with it, where we actually put it into a full 10 barrels to ferment, because it definitely went down in cell concentration quite a bit when it hit the wort. But I noticed that a couple of resistant strains were starting to emerge. So of course those were all killed and nuked instantly at the end of the experiment, but it is on the table, as well as being a microbiologist by education. I can do lots of cool, interesting things, and especially since his wild yeast is in the air, in here in the brewery. So I think a really cool, just open air fermentation would yield some great results here.
Did you taste the result of that fermentation with the sourdough?
I did not, because it didn't. It left a lot of sugar left behind, so it didn't ferment completely. But I noticed that in my samples there were a couple of cells that were alive and thriving, and so that's why I said we'd have to go through several generations just to isolate it. My lab equipment is nothing more than a microscope in methylene blue, which is a stain used to indicate if yeast are alive or dead, because living yeast can metabolize the stain and then dead yeast show up as blue. And so that's the extent of my lab. So we'll do the 5-gallon bucket thing for a while, and then once we get something great and healthy isolated, then I could potentially freeze it at University of Arkansas at minus 75 until we needed it, or I could easily restart the experiment and just plan ahead. It's going to take me a month and a half to get the cells. But
I have a feeling that Nathan's going to MacGyver something. I mean, you give Nathan a microscope and some blue stain. He'll use some baling wire and some
build a space shuttle.
Yeah. That's right.
One last kind of backdoor way, actually, or roundabout way that the food and the beer are directly paired is we have two really great local farmers that we work with. One of whom provides us with a lot of our produce and some of our meat, and another of whom currently has 2 cattle set aside for us that we're feeding spent grain to all the calf and those 2 cattle, right? And then once they get mature, then here comes some fillets and some delicious ribeyes and some hamburgers.
Again, recycling.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Biological recycling.
And we're also really super excited. We also got in touch of a chicken farmer, and he, basically birds are the only ones who will eat the waste from hops, basically the waste from the kettle. Because everyone else can taste the bitterness and don't want it. So birds lack the taste buds for bitterness, and so they'll eat anything. And so when he picks up, he collects all of our hop trube, skins off however deep it, because we just pour it on top of our spent grain. However deep it penetrates, he just scoops and gives to the chicken as what he calls a snack, and everything else goes to his pigs and cows. But the farmer who's doing the 2 cows and calves for us typically sells them off as soon as they can be, weaned off their mother. And so he's just doing it special for us. So it's going to be the first time that I think he's actually going to send them to the butcher himself.
Wow. So let's do one more beer, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
So
I'll let you guys choose. So the first 3 we did, the Fayette Weiss, the Armstrong American Pale Ale, and the Mockingbird are 3-year rounders. A kind of a quasi fourth-year rounder we have is our coffee stout on nitro. I got you guys the CO2 version right here because it is our winter seasonal right now. And so we have that. We also have lots of one-off specialty beers, or quote-unquote artisanal beers. We have our Wild Boar Belgian IPA, which is, we use IPA because it's the closest thing to the style I could think of, but it's kind of like a hoppy Belgian pale. And so we have that. We also have our The Trouble with Trapel, which has been insanely popular. It's a 10.5%, alcohol by volume. Been really popular here at the restaurant. And then we have our Old Iron Belgian Dark Strong Ale, which is about 7.9% alcohol. And that just came on tap 2 days ago. So I'll let you guys pick which is the last one you
bring the ESB as well.
The ESB is here too. Yes, it is those two. No.
I think
So
those two.
I'll let you
yes.
choose, Andy. I mean, we'll be sampling the rest of these when the thing is turned off. But which would you like to talk about, Andy?
Well, I was going to ask, the Trouble with Tripels, does that have any, is it just a standard triple or is it a flavored spice triple? Is it just a standard triple?
It's the standard one. We've done flavored ones before, like rosemary peppercorn, as those guys mentioned, and a blood orange version as well.
I'm curious about the Belgian IPA because that's a style that you're looking skeptical, Andy.
I'm looking at you like you're getting to make the call because you're the boss.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
This is your show,
James.
James.
Unique ingredients. Right?
Yeah, the Dark Strong, of course, imported Belgian dark candy syrup, and then the Trapel, I made it in the kitchen. The candy sugar used for that.
Let's taste your homemade candy sugar then.
Okay, so
well, you didn't say that.
He was trying to be succinct.
And so, just to make candy sugar or candy sugar syrup at home, basically, I think it's 1 pound of water per pound of sugar, if I remember correctly. My version was a little bit different. I had 100 pounds of sugar I needed to basically make into syrup. And so basically boil water for 20 minutes, stir in your sugar, let it boil for 20 minutes. At the end of the 20 minutes, add your lemons, let it cool. Add any spices at that time we're going to use. I use clove. And of course with the lemons you get the citrus. But I had a lot of fun brewing that beer. Belgian beers are super easy to make because the yeast pretty much take care. If you take care of the yeast, they take care of you. And so, for 10.5% beer, alcohol at that level provides a lot of sweetness. And so a lot of care was taken to make sure there was a lot of sweetness coming from the malt too, because alcohol can be sweet and also be burn. You can also get a lot of burn from alcohol as well. So. I diverted from the typical Trapel recipe in that I also used some crystallized Belgian malt. And I've got Cara, Vienna, and Munich back there, and also Special B, and I think I used Cara Munich.
What's your fermentation temperature?
For that guy, I started at 67, and then we slowly increased to 71 over the 7-day period. And then I think when I crashed it, it was still hovering around about 70.
Which is fairly low. From when I talk to professional brewers, fairly low for that.
75.
Or I've talked to brewers that say 90 sometimes.
Oh yeah,
On saisons and stuff for sure. I mean, the big problem that most people have, especially home brewers, with making a Trapel is getting it dry enough, right? Because they put so much ingredients in it that it's tough to get it dry enough that it's not gloppy. This is an excellent example.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
You. And we had a lot of fun brewing it because, I think Brew Like a Monk is the go-to professional source for Belgian beer makers. So you homebrewers can take a note of that. Like other than getting in at making friends with some monk or Abbey or Trappist brewer in continental Europe, that's as close as we can get, professional even.
Stan Hieronymus has been on the show, 3 times? 4 times?
Awesome. Well, there you go.
Including an interview for the book we like to call Blam.
Brew Like a Monk.
Yeah. And so, we mashed in, I think, at 142, and then we increased it to 151 the last, quarter of an hour. And so, I was, put that steam jacket on that mash tun to work that day.
Wow.
Well, you got to keep moving on. If you're a coffee fan, that coffee stout is stellar.
we will continue moving on. It's just that the numbers on the recorder will not.
Right. So I just want your joy documented is all.
At least,
Well, and give our Segas props.
yeah, that's where I was going. About 30 pounds of whole bean Arcegas. They roast a special blend just for Apple Blossom, and it's 30 pounds of that in a dry hop style. And so I transfer to the bright tank, and then that's when we throw the bags of whole coffee beans. And I do whole coffee beans because every professional brewery that's done a coffee stout that I've worked with always ground the beans. And in addition to going through an industrial grade coffee grinder the whole time, they, you lose all that oil when you grind beans. That's why the powder sticks to the blades, is because that oil is causing it to stick there. And so we fill the bags up with coffee, and then I slam them up against the FRP wall there, which probably costs way more than I should be slamming things into. But that's just to lightly crack them so the oils can be exposed, and then we toss it in. So.
Oh wow.
The coffee aroma on that.
This is beer?
Yes, exactly.
Coffee.
Oh yeah, it's about 300 milligrams per pint.
It's about a cup and a half of coffee per pint, basically.
Worth of caffeine.
Worth of caffeine. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But you're trying to wrap this up.
Wow.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's really good.
There you go.
That's
If you like coffee, you love it. If you don't like coffee, I definitely don't recommend you try it, but you're more than welcome to.
Why would you get a coffee stout if you didn't like coffee?
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
This tastes like coffee.
This tastes like too much like coffee.
Well, hello.
This IPA is hoppy.
Some comments. Yeah.
That aside, we have great clientele.
Yeah.
We really do.
Keep those good reviews coming, folks. Thank you so much.
Whenever you're in an entertainment or hospitality industry, you guys interact with people, so you know.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. We will, and it will continue to be fun, and we will stop drinking beer at some point and eat something, because I've offered to buy Andy dinner for coming along today. So this has been awesome. Thanks you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I apologize for waiting this long to come to you.
No, it just means we've got to get ready for part 2. We've got to. This doesn't end here.
I'm all about that.
All right.
Excellent.
And a closing remark. So we got to add a third tap tower to our bar. So right now we have a total of 10 taps, with 2 being in 12 total with the 2 nitrogen stout faucets. And then we need to add a third tower to add another 6 taps, because I have 3 beers waiting. So we've hand built all of our tap towers out of pure copper, and so we're basically waiting for the final, soldering and welding to be done on them, and then we'll be able to actually throw it up. But
18 beers.
yeah, we'll open with that tap tower. We'll have 3 beers on it, which it'll be half full, and then I'll do basically 3 infusions from all those 3 beers, and so that tap will be filled up by the end of next week, hopefully, if it's put up by then.
Wow. A lot of fun. And thank you guys so
Yeah,
much.
thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank y'all. Well, thanks again to Evan, Sammy, Nathan, and Andy. After we chatted, Andy and I had supper at Apple Blossom Brewing Company, and I completely blew my diet for the weekend. But I have no regrets. Very tasty stuff, and I will be back soon. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Our Basic Brewing growler bags are available in our shop. Protect your precious homebrew and craft beers. You take it from place to place. Check out our support link, where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site, along with combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than 1 DVD at a time. You can check out our shirts in the store, too. Our Basic Brewing Brewers Logbooks are on the site, too. Keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Charcuterie, the craft of salting, smoking, and curing, and Norpro Stoneware Butter Keeper. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly, greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.